All right. So it looks like a lot of people have moved into their rooms, Sarah. So I think it's just going to be you and me to begin with. Um, so if you are good to get going, I can go ahead and get us started.
Certainly, thanks. Wow, I'm surprised
Sure.
more people from East Side are not on this.
Yeah, I had a nice conversation last night with an Elizabeth resident as well. But we did have another one of these back on May 15th that had a lot of attendance. So I think a lot of people attended that one
Mhm.
um, or last night. So
Can you
that's
tell me who
okay.
you spoke to last night, or is that
Uh,
private?
oh no, he was very open about that. So it was Clifton.
Oh, yeah, I
Um,
know. Keith. Yeah,
yeah,
this is
yeah.
me.
So
Hey.
hi, nice to meet you. So yeah,
Hey.
Clifton and I spent some time talking through some things last night. He also stayed through the North Inner one, which is what I presented last round. And so we had a little bit of conversation, and I'm pretty familiar with the area that you all are in. I'm kind of a, closer to uptown South Charlotte person as well.
Mhm.
So, grew up kind of going into the,
Yeah,
Dilworth over to Elizabeth area. So, pretty familiar, but how, I know you said you joined another room last time. So, did you already get like the beginning spiel? Would you like
yeah.
me to kind of skip into the actual content, or did you want to review any of that?
The content would be great.
Sure.
It's an overwhelming. I mean, I'm on the land use committee for our neighborhood association,
Yeah,
the Lisbon Community Association. But boy, it's a lot to absorb.
it
And,
is.
what I've been trying to figure out is what are the changes from the current policy map to this proposed policy map,
Sure.
what they are, particularly focusing around Independence Park and East 7th Street
Yeah,
and the
absolutely.
density that you all are
Sure.
thinking about.
Sure. So let me actually pull up I'll pull up the current and the revised policy map.
It'd be
I'll
great. They
also,
did that for West Center a few minutes ago, and it was like way down in the document.
yeah, absolutely. So what I will do is I'll go ahead and move us here in the presentation, and then I'll also pull up our policy. So let's pull up the adopted, and we'll also pull up the revised.
Okay, so
Alrighty.
this is okay, great.
Yeah. So what we'll do is I believe I have, yes. There we go. And then I will do the
And I
same
got
for
to
the.
find, all right, I see the park. I see that. That's my, oh, I navigate here.
All
Where the
right, cool.
park.
Our areas are on there as well. Yes. So here is our current one for East Inner. So that's,
Mm-hmm,
this area, and then you all are up here towards
mm-hmm,
Uptown a little bit more.
mm-hmm.
So is there, you said you kind of wanted to look at Independence here.
Yeah, like along the park, it's all the purple,
Sure.
and that is Community Activity Center. Is that right?
This here on 7th.
Yeah, and
So
around.
that's neighborhood activity center. So this is going to
Okay.
be your neighborhood activity center, which is the lowest intensity of the activity centers.
Okay.
Then it goes up to community activity center, which is like this kind of mid blue. And then
Mm-hmm.
regional is going to be more like, let's see, is like down here, for example, like the mall. The mall or, way out here in Valentine, like those
Yeah,
really, really intense centers. So for
we don't
you
want to be
all,
Valentine. Yeah.
yeah, no. I really enjoy living where we live. So, yes, this is going to be your neighborhood activity center. You've got one kind of down central here, and then you've got one down 7th Street here as well.
Mm-hmm. So
And then you do have some community activity center.
how is that different? What's proposed along 7th Street, the Neighborhood Activity Center, from what is currently there, and what would be allowed that would not be allowed
Sure.
now?
Sure. So let me go ahead and also pull up in our program guide. So in our program guide, there is a policy map manual that kind of goes over more details on the map, just so you know where to reference this material. It kind of goes through like the place types and everything like that. And that's where you're going to find those characteristics,
Hmm.
such as we'll move down here, neighborhood activity center. You're going to start with the general description. They're typically smaller, mixed use, but smaller, more embedded in neighborhoods, which is, why in, Elizabeth, these are more neighborhood activity centers. They aren't
Hmm.
really heavy density, and we're not looking to encourage them to become extremely dense because a neighborhood activity center is meant to be those mixed uses, but fit next to neighborhoods and be that, like, you're like on Selwyn as well over by Myers Park. You have those kind of like smaller where Mellow Mushroom
Hmm.
used to be, things like that. Like that's a neighborhood activity center. It's where the
But it
people in
also
the neighborhood are walking.
includes multifamily, right?
Some level. Again, it's not as dense. There's going to be like if you then translate and look at the UDO, you're going to have more restrictions there. Like you're not going to have like in a regional where you can have, really, really high and that kind of stuff. Like it
Hmm.
is more limited, in order to match the scale of what's around it. So, let's
Is
one
there a
here.
height or a number of stories of building
Yeah,
restriction on neighborhood activity center?
there are.
Hmm.
I would have to look further into the UDO because that is on the UDO side. So like ours is more talking
Okay.
about the general like character and scale, like
Got
how
it.
it fits into there. But if you do take this and you look at those districts, for example, neighborhood center here is NC. So within the UDO, if you look at the NC zoning district, it'll tell you specifically like those development regulations. So that's kind
Okay.
of how the R's and the UDO work together. Again, as you mentioned, I know this is all very technical, so that's why we're doing um, so yes, so I would, if you all are wanting to see the exact regulations within the UDO, look for that NC district and what is allowed there. And then from a place type perspective, um, let me find our so this also is going to be helpful. Table 3 is the minor map amendment criteria. So this is when we're going through rezonings. For example, if something were to be changing, Table 3 shows you what the requirements are for that, from our perspective. So we're going to be looking at, what are the adjacencies? If, for example, if you're looking at like regional activity center, they're going to be looking for things above like neighborhood one. Like we're not going to be one of the preferred adjacencies there is going to be like into and up versus a
Okay.
neighborhood activity center. The preferred adjacencies are things like neighborhood one because again, it's that smaller like neighborhood activity center, a little less dense.
Which is
Um,
very similar to what we have now
exactly.
along Seventh Street with the building, the businesses and some
Yes.
apartment buildings that back up to
Mhm.
State and Greenway where I live.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings me back to your initial question of like how does that change? It's
Hmm.
really not meant to change anything. And I'm looking for our place type descriptions. I think that might, yeah, here we go. So we're real that really doesn't encourage much of a change. It mostly encourages it to stay kind of within that. So when we did do the policy map, we did consider what's on the ground today. Again, it's an aspirational map, so we considered what's on the ground today and what place type best suited what is there and what the area wants it to either continue being or become. So, in that area, as we've heard a lot, is like Elizabeth is happy with how things are in general. Obviously, there's some things here and there. We always can, consider environmental justice and add even more trees and that kind of thing. But in general, we did try and align the place types with what, fits with there. So that neighborhood activity center being those, uses that you can kind of go to on 7th and up on Central.
So process-wise, would a small area plan then be adopted later based
So
on this policy map?
So right now, that would fall into more of our next level of guidance, which would be that, let me pull that. So back on this page, any further like small area plans would be, or like other environmental justice plans, action plans, things like that would be in that next level down of specific plans.
Okay.
The community area plans are just like that step before that. So these, everything since the comprehensive plan has just been like filtering down and down and down and like getting more and more.
Mhm.
So yes, that would be where anything like more specific that's even smaller scale, like neighborhood scale or anything like that would come after in specific plans. Um,
Will there be any realignment zoning required in Elizabeth?
I'm not sure about Elizabeth specifically, but I do know that alignment rezoning is in their like pre-planning process. So, that is, the next steps and some of this stuff is dependent upon the community area plans and their adoption. But I do know that like they've been doing some pre-planning for that. So alignment rezoning will, you know, be a whole process and they can share with you specifically when they're in that process, like what specifics are coming there. I'm not sure right now because I don't know the like where we are in that process, but that would have its own like full engagement process as well. So you all would have the opportunity to also, you know, ask questions and do all this kind of stuff beforehand.
I know that the city right now is on hold with any down zonings like historic district designation, which I know Clifton is very, very involved in. Um,
Mhm.
and so the city's not considering any of those overlay districts because of the statute that the legislature kind of
Yeah,
unexpectedly adopted last December, requiring 100% consent.
yeah.
So, do you know if any of the alignment rezonings in Elizabeth would require a downzoning from its current zoning?
I'm not sure, but in general, at least from a land use perspective, like we typically don't look to downzone. Um, obviously there's specific cases and everything where something might be required, but in general, we are not necessarily looking to downzone. Um, it's typically looking to, move to a
Higher
more,
use, mhm,
yeah,
more dense. I mean, the city's obviously moving to be more dense, particularly in these in-town neighborhoods. And I've lived here 42 years, and
wow,
my grandmother lived in this neighborhood, so I've got a lot of history here. I
yeah,
played in the park when I was a little girl, a long time ago. Um, and the change is astonishing,
yeah.
and it's only going to be more dense. And I think Cliff and a lot of residents have a different um, point of view about how that density would work and housing style and things. But
Hmm.
what I am more concerned about, and I think members of the Elizabeth Community Association, is where's everybody going to put these cars?
Yeah.
Right now, along 7th Street, with all these really wonderful little new restaurants and businesses that have opened, which are, I will say, are extremely cool, that I can
Hmm.
walk 2 minutes and it's just like living in New York City, but in a great way. I live on Greenway Avenues. I mean, you can kind of see where I
Oh,
am
right
right
here.
there. Yeah, you're like close to my house right there in that first long block. Um, to walk out your door and you're up at Rosemont or you're at the coffee
Hmm.
shop or you're at the noodle place. It's great.
Hmm.
But a whole lot of people drive to all of these bars and restaurants
Yeah.
and they're parking. And in fact, the businesses are directing them to park on the neighborhood streets. Now, these are public streets. It's permitted to park there, but it is tough on the neighbors and it's
Hmm.
tough on vehicles to get through and everything. And as the UDO requires less parking and trying to move people more towards mass transit, it's it's a difficult transition for these neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's fair. And we have heard a good bit of feedback about the just in general the parking aspect, not only in
Mhm.
y'all's neighborhood, but everywhere pretty much. So that is definitely something that we've heard, and I know that the UDO team has also heard that as well. So I know there's, and we do include as well, I don't know if this is any interest, but in the, find my proper screen, let's see. So there is an assessment in these that I'm sure that they may have mentioned in the previous one, but
I didn't
within
hear it.
here,
Yeah.
yeah, so in the supporting the vision section, in mobility as well as the other ones, there are now these new assessments that show kind of a current state of things in your area.
Mhm.
So, for example, here, table three, the mobility assessment, there is a parking aspect. And so it shows you, for these specific areas on this map, like M12, M10. So, for example, M10 is that kind of along 7th Street. So, if
Mhm.
we look at M10,
Whoops, where is it? Okay.
yeah, so then parking is not fully aligned, so it shows you kind of like the status of pedestrian network, bike network, crossings, block length, parking, all of that kind of stuff. And the assessments are meant to assist with both developers and residents to be able to evaluate proposed projects.
Yeah.
So these tables can be pretty helpful in that. And then we
Mhm.
also have these assessments for open space and community character and environmental justice.
Yeah. And I focus on cars and parking, but I love the pedestrian network column
Hmm.
because crossing East 7th Street, you basically want to have a nun and a priest with you and
Yeah,
hold this nun up to say stop, even in those crosswalks. It's
yeah,
very, very dangerous.
yes, absolutely. So that is those things were considered in these assessments. And I these are kind of a newer tool. We definitely didn't have these before.
Mhm.
So I would highly encourage you all to, use these when you're looking to evaluate projects coming.
Mhm.
It kind of gives you kind of an easy, quick glance at it. But within the appendix, there is an in-depth look at how these were developed and the methodology behind them. It also gives you kind of a look at the mobility trends. And then, we have a little bit more information from our partners in this section just because, there's a lot of work being done with our mobility partners. So there's also information on the strategic investment areas in here and more specifics on each of those areas. And then some information about like, mobility programs and things like that. And then the other sections as well, open space and such, will also look into that as well. So, you know, parks and greenways in East and the tree canopy obviously are
Mhm.
strengths here. So you're going to see
Mhm.
that. But then, maybe public plazas and courtyards, not as much. Same thing here, again, you guys are it's a beautiful area. I have enjoyed growing up nearby. So, these are really cool to look at. I think it gives you kind of a quicker glance. And then environmental justice. I know we were talking mostly about mobility, but this is some new data as well. Um, and it also
Yeah, it
provides
is. Yeah.
a heat analysis. So that's
Huh.
new data as well. And so you'll see you've got a little bit of a heat island up here. I was
'Cause
talking
that's
about
over
that.
at the hospital, but that's over at the hospitals.
Yeah, so it's,
That's
we've
all
got a
that
little,
brick. It's
yeah,
all the brick.
more
Yeah.
impervious surfaces. You're getting the
Hmm.
hotter temperatures there, a little bit down here, but mostly up here where it is as, yeah, much more like developed in hardscape and things like
Yep.
that. So that's new data. Very cool, I think. It's nice that we're kind of starting to dig into that. And then you all do have, there's also this community character one I mentioned that looks
Hmm.
at, public space, amenities, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So these are pretty cool, I think.
Well, and I'm
Yeah,
focusing on Elizabeth because I live here, but I
yeah,
walk and drive over to Plaza Midwood. It's an absolute nightmare over
sure.
there along Central Avenue.
Hmm.
Um,
And that's not too far. I mean, it's the border
I
of
don't know
your
if it's
area.
East End or not. I don't know where that is, what
It
area
is so central is
it is.
the northern
Dividing
boundary
line.
for, yeah. So it's
So this
shared.
side, wow, so it's shared because along Central Avenue on either side, the concerns are the same.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, you've got kind of that same strip. It increases
Hmm.
a little bit up here into that community activity center, but you do start to see a little bit more like neighborhood too as you get closer to that area in the
Yeah.
back. Some more of that down here. And then similarly, I'm sure you're familiar, you see some of those neighborhood activity centers too over here by East and then Cotswold area.
Hmm.
So we've got a few kind of strips of that in kind of our southish area. So you're seeing kind of similar conditions in those areas.
So if we want to talk to someone about realignment zoning, who is that?
So I can send you their website. It's the Charlotte UDO. So let me
Oh,
pull
it's just the UDO, Charlotte
hmm
UDO.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's charlotteudo.org. Um,
Okay.
so they've just got information on alignment rezoning, and I'll send you back to the city website. And I think you can sign up either on their
But you said
website
there'd
or
be
here.
all kinds of public engagement. So,
Yeah, yeah, they
okay.
are going to be doing their own engagement, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for that. And then here at the bottom, subscribing for project updates. They do send out emails just like we do to update people on the process. So I would definitely pay attention to that. And then also our CLT planning Instagram, we all like post updates there and then send email blasts as well are going to be your best areas to
Great.
be notified. But your area is pretty tuned in, so luckily you guys typically are aware of the engagement going on.
Well,
And then
we have a lot of advantages, and so you don't want to complain, but
there's
we have a lot of
always room.
advantages because we protect our neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, it's well organized. As we get closer into the city, typically these our older neighborhoods do have a more established neighborhood
So
organization.
this policy map,
Mhm.
the colors are different, aren't they?
So there's a few areas that are
Because
going to, I'm going to actually do this.
yeah, along 7th Street that showed neighborhood activity center is that darker kind of fuchsia pinky purple,
Hmm.
but it's different colors on that other one. That's what threw me off.
So this one is the same. The only changes on this revised policy map are the ones that are highlighted. So everything else is
Okay.
just kind of like faded into the background, not changing. But these highlighted parcels, so for example, this section here, um, by Hawthorne and Park and Caswell,
Yeah.
this section will actually change to neighborhood activity center instead of campus, which will kind of incorporate the same like aspirational guidelines as this area. And then it looks like there's a little more campus down on Torrance Baldwin area that's changing to neighborhood activity center and a little bit more here along Randolph.
That
is kind of
probably
your,
makes sense. Yeah, over
yeah,
on
campus.
Fifth and Park
Hmm.
Drive, abutting the park. In fact, there was a big rezoning a few years ago that to allow medical office, and it's completely incongruent with campus.
Yeah. Neighborhood activity center is going to give you a little bit more flexibility for uses as well. And as we were kind of talking about before, uh, less intense housing allowed in neighborhood activity center, but some. And so that gives you a little bit more flexibility too. Again, we were talking about, where are these people going? Like where are people going? And so it does allow for a little bit more flexibility than campus because campus is very like everything needs to be tied to that institution there. So it gives you a little more flexibility to have some other uses that support the neighborhood. Um, so that, you know, I think that would be considered more of an upgrade as well, just because of
Yeah.
that flexibility. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah, and I think that's pretty much most of the changes.
There's just so much I don't know, but I've just got to dig into this. All of us do. The You mentioned that the city is really committed to greater density in these inner town, close in neighborhoods. So how does that jive with people who are advocates for historic designation, which so
So,
much restricts the size of
absolutely.
home?
So our first priority with neighborhoods since the comprehensive plan was to protect established neighborhoods. So again, those neighborhood one designations, there is a very heavy emphasis on protecting those neighborhoods.
Okay.
So that's kind of like the first, you know, neighborhood one, we're really looking to preserve as much of that as possible. And that's, also taken into account through our rezoning process. That is kind of the first leading charge. And why we do still have so much in one because of that. And that's something we heard from the community, is we do want our neighborhoods protected, which is totally understandable. So
Mhm.
that's where like the activity centers and those designations come in is really kind of focusing that growth on those spaces, like the activity centers that are already more dense, like looking at ways to push that density, encourage that in our activity centers instead of, you know, changing neighborhoods and things like that. So that's kind of the focus of the activity centers is focusing that density into those areas. So
But
that's
if
yeah,
the activity center areas were part of a designated historic district,
it would
they
be
would,
under that first. Like any sort of covenants or like restrictions or anything like that are going to still remain no matter what.
okay, I want to make sure I understand what you said. So any covenants or restrictions would remain. So if an overlay district was adopted, let's say along 7th Street, which is
Mhm.
neighborhood activity center on these maps, if it was historic district overlay, then anything that could be developed would be restricted as to size and style
I
according
believe,
to the overlay,
yeah, I believe that
which would
those
be a
still,
lot shorter and smaller than and less dense than a neighborhood activity would contemplate.
yeah, so any sort of like restrictions in general that are already in place, like it wouldn't trump that. It wouldn't,
Okay.
it wouldn't, that would still be considered. Like,
No.
so as far as I'm aware, that's what we've been told. That's what we've always been saying is it does not change any sort of restrictions like that.
Okay.
So, it's a balance. That's why we have strong relationships with our historic neighborhoods, groups, and things like that, so that we
Mhm.
we do, and they, we all do review rezonings and things like that. Like all of the different departments and divisions have a hand in reviewing that. So, any sort of historic elements are going to have comments from our
Yeah.
team members there. So,
And I don't know what's going to happen with that, with our neighborhood. Cliff's been very involved. There's a whole lot of different opinions about that in the neighborhood.
mhm. Yeah, he mentioned last night, he said that some may disagree, or, but that's okay. We're here to hear all the sides. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, he did tell me about that and all the work that y'all have been putting in. So, been a long journey. But is there anything specific else you wanted to look at with the maps or even the plans? I'm not sure if there's anything else that might be a helpful resource or a note.
There's really not. It's hard to be the only person. I thought there'd be a lot of other people asking questions.
Yeah. Let me also pull the plans back up and see if I had anything. Well, let's see.
And the great thing, it protects the N1 that's already here and assumes that people are going to continue to live in single family
Hmm.
houses or smaller,
Yeah. You
less
know,
dense.
the goal really is to provide some housing options, but not necessarily just one type of option. We don't want to everybody has a right to live where they want to live and whatever style they want to live in. I personally like, you know, to live in a little quieter area than most people my age, but that's okay. Some
So you're
people
not
like
in
to live.
South End.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not in South Bend. And if that is something that people enjoy, that's wonderful. I'm glad it's there for them. But yeah, I'm a little further down.
Mhm.
So, and this might be helpful as well.
Okay, so which section are you in now?
So I am in the community needs and goals. So looking at our table of contents here, that is going to be chapter 3, after our neighborhood profile. And I'm going to pull that back. And so here is where you kind of get a look overall at your area's needs and goals. So the first priority for you all, and the only one that is below a 5, which is that threshold, would be environmental justice. We
I
did
was
talk a little,
surprised at that. I
yeah.
was
So,
very surprised that access to housing was not um,
mhm,
at least made the threshold. Yeah.
it's right there, so it's right on that line. So, I think another element of that probably is the fact that has a lot of housing within a smaller area, but again, it kind of skews it a little bit. But yeah, it looks like environmental is the only one, and we did look at some of that heat data and some other things as well. That does not by any means mean that things are in terrible shape or we're, looking to make crazy changes. But in our it just leads to, the goals that are priorities for the area. So it
Yeah.
really just indicates we want to, you know, make sure that we're still maintaining health, safety, active communities and integrating the natural and built environment. Really aspirations for like moving forward to make sure that anything new and coming is considering that environmental justice.
Yeah.
And
Well, if
then
you
that,
talk to anyone about access to housing, Elizabeth, all these different subdivisions that make up Elizabeth, when they were developed over 100 years ago, they were intentionally done to support different kinds of housing.
mhm,
And you live in Dilworth, so are you familiar with?
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah, next door to me is a duplex. It's always been a duplex. It was built that way. And across the street, behind us on Fifth Street, there are quadruplexes that were built that way 100 years ago. And
Mhm.
the lots were sized for that. And there
Yeah.
are little bungalows behind us. The lots are smaller than the lots on my street. And that was very intentional. So, and if you look at the original deeds, of course, they had all kinds of illegal restrictions now, like about no people of the black race, but they they had a minimum amount of money and size of the houses, And it was intentional. You got people of different incomes and different backgrounds and business, working goals. And
Mm-hmm.
that makes this neighborhood cool because it's not Myers Park. And I have friends at Myers Park, but you got big lots and big houses that are deed restricted to make them that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, accessibility of housing is important, particularly as it's become so expensive to buy here. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
glad we bought 40 years ago. Little bungalows are over $1 million now. So
Yeah.
where are people going to live in this neighborhood unless the zoning allows for denser and less expensive,
Mm-hmm.
therefore less expensive
Yeah.
options?
Yeah. And we have seen a good bit of into added just in general across the city, which is kind of, I think, stepping towards providing some of those other options. But it definitely is a balance of protecting our established neighborhoods with adding more housing. It's a constant ebb and flow that we're always kind of evaluating through our rezoning process. Um, and we're going to keep trying. So we'll just we keep trying to find ways to provide that
Mhm.
as best we can. But it definitely it's a challenge.
Yep.
And just wanted to also point out this
Okay.
anticipated change area because we were talking about kind of those changes within the policy map. This is chapter 4, I believe, creating complete communities. And so this is when you start to look into the place type maps. And this is where you can look into the types of change being recommended for your area,
Okay.
in general. So, for example, it's going to look at one of the predominant types of change is commercial to activity center. So instead
Mhm.
of just that straight commercial, these are more flexible. These activity centers and IMU are more flexible. And so it shows you kind of this is the
Mhm.
existing place type, and these are the kinds of recommended place types that we might recommend instead of commercial. So, neighborhood activity center, you're seeing a lot of that. And then community activity center or IMU, you're not seeing like regional here because again, scale, density, that kind of thing.
Good.
And then it'll also go into like campus. We saw a few areas where campus was changing. And then you also have how those change types align with priority goals. So those are the two like parts of this is here's the type of change and here's how that type of change aligns with your priority goals for your area, which were outlined back in that, profile area we were looking at. So if you're kind of walking through it, you can start here and say, if you're maybe talking to somebody else, this is where we identified what goals are needed, but
Mhm.
then this is how those goals lead to changes and how they apply. So
Okay.
that might kind of help break it down a little bit. And then once you kind of that's kind of how the plan builds is it starts with that overarching analysis, how that applies to the changes, and then further support for those types of changes and needs through these assessments. So like if you consider the document as kind of like building on itself, that's kind of how it builds upon itself. um, and then very, very last in the in section, you have a little bit more detail on the policy guidance and recommendations and what type they are and the support and who's leading it and time frame. And this all comes from the 2040 comprehensive plan and how those policies apply here. So that's like the most technical stuff is going to be in this like implementation guide in the last chapter.
Okay.
Um, as well as some more looks at like in-depth like SIA, some illustrative concepts. Again, anything in this section though is just illustrative. These are just, hey, in these types of conditions, this is something that's possible. It's not looking at, you know, going to that specific area and doing this there? That's
Mhm.
a question we had in the previous session. So just to note that these are just examples of conditions we've seen across the city. It's by no means saying we're going to come into Central or Seventh and do this there. But it just were they were these were focus areas where we looked at conditions that we saw across the city and like how that might change in the future. But again, they're illustrative, not aspirational, just illustrative. So, for example, this one looks at kind of that Seventh Street area
Mhm.
and how neighborhood activity center would kind of fit in there and how campus would and things. Um,
Yeah.
and that's it. And then we move into our appendix, which the appendix is separate because it's the same reference for all documents. But that's where you can kind of find some more information on the methodology behind the assessments. And the toolkit is cool too because it's got existing projects and programs that can be utilized like today. For example, how a neighborhood could utilize open space to create a neighborhood park. There are existing programs to do that. So the neighborhood toolkit is kind of a resource for neighborhoods to take action now if they want to on something. So I know that's a lot, a lot. I hope I made it somewhat more understandable. Um,
You really did.
oh, good,
Just
good, good.
drill down on it.
Yeah,
Give
and
me,
we're going to continue having office hours, even though so our comment period closes Friday. And then we will be publishing, I'll actually pull it up on the screen. We'll be publishing comments, including staff responses on the 25th. And then August 4th, we will be presenting to Council's Transportation Planning and Development Committee. And then City Council decision is to be determined. We will announce information upon that as we get closer to it. But the comments will be available and posted with those staff responses as well. So even though our comment period is closing Friday, we will still have office hours. So if you do have more questions or you have other members in your community that have questions, because it is some guidance is helpful. We're this is new for all of us, so we totally understand. So I will put the office hours link in here, and if you do have more questions, please feel free to join us at one of those. I, along with a few other staff, join those and can answer questions about any area or really anything. And if we don't have the answers, just like here, we can always, get people in contact with who does have the answer.
yeah,
Um,
I'm opening that so that I can copy it. Mm.
yeah, absolutely. So we have those. We'll continue those through adoption, I believe, um, so that people can still come and ask questions even though the comment period is closed.
And these meetings have been recorded, right?
Yes, and
And how do
so
people review that? Our chair of our committee would like to know that.
yeah, so the May 15th ones are already up. I'll post our YouTube here. Our YouTube channel is where we post these.
Okay. The Charlotte Planning YouTube channel.
So I'll put
Okay.
that in the chat as well. But it is just CLT planning on YouTube. So anything really, Instagram, YouTube, anywhere is CLT planning. So you can review that there. And then there's also some other playlists there. There's recordings from our Planning Academy sessions. We did a speaker series in 2023. We had different departments and divisions present on kind of general planning, which can be helpful, especially if someone is not as involved. And so those are also on there, including one from Tom Hanchett that did a historic, yeah, the historic Charlotte one. And so that one's pretty interesting from him. Um, and there's some interesting content on that as well. So there's lots of different recordings from past events, but those May 15th ones are already there. And then we will upload the ones from this week. in the next like week or so.
Well, thank you very much.
Of
Thanks.
course. Thank you for joining us, and we really do appreciate you guys being involved.
I hope no one wants to review this recording, but just me. But thank you all.
Most likely it's the people who attend. So, you know, but well, thank you so much, Sarah. And if you have any other questions, please let us know. You also can email us anytime at cltfuture2040 at charlottenc.gov, which is also on our website if you need it. But yeah,
Right.
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye bye.